What up, Viking fans, and welcome to the Skol State of Mind podcast. As you already know, I'm your host, D Woods, and the 2024 NFL draft has officially ended. I'm not sure how y'all feel about it, but I'm going to let you know how I feel about it. Leading up to this draft, I was really excited. I mean, I had high hopes for the Minnesota Vikings, and I feel like they delivered on some of those high hopes. I mean, I really feel like the Minnesota Vikings went out there and was aggressive, and they went and drafted players that I can see being pillars on this team for the foreseeable future. So let's have a quick draft recap real quick. I'm not sure if you guys were tuning in. We had a lot of Vikings content creators going live at the same time. And in the comments, like, it was really weird because you had some people out there that were talking about fire Kwesi, and Kwesi had to go. The Minnesota Vikings was going to, get anything done. They was playing with house money. Like, it was a lot of, stuff going on before the Minnesota Vikings, pick came in. And I would say, like, days and maybe even hours leading up to the draft, I kind of felt like there was a great possibility that the Minnesota Vikings weren't be able to move up in the draft and maybe take like a top 5 pick in the draft. And that came to fruition because I feel like this, though, we out there as Viking fans kind of felt that it was a guarantee that the Minnesota Vikings were going to move up, but we kind of didn't throw in the picture that they have to have a trade partner. And I really feel like teams like Arizona, teams like, the San Diego Chargers, yes, I still call them San Diego, teams like the New England Patriots, I think at the end of the day, they probably were asking too much. And I really credit Kwesi for kind of drawing the line and saying, like, well, I'm just going to stay pat and let the board, play to me. And I think it worked out for him. So let's talk about the picks. Now, before the draft, the Minnesota Vikings had traded their second round and third round pick in the 2025 draft along with the second round pick of the 2024 draft to get Houston's 23 pick. So let's just keep that in mind right now. So I think the surprise that kind of like changed the scales for everybody was basically when the Atlanta Falcons drafted Michael Penix with a number 8 pick. I mean, I thought Dallasturner was going to get drafted there. I mean, I don't see a big issue with the Atlanta Falcons taking the quarterback. The only issue I can see that people like having is that they took him in the top 10 pick. But like I said before, you never know what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins and how he's going to respond to that Achilles injury. And, we know like firsthand that when you are reaching for a quarterback, it kind of hurts your franchise. So I believe that the Atlanta Falcons did the right thing by drafting Michael Penix with number 8 because you don't know about Kirk Cousins. You don't know how he's going to respond. And when you're ready for another quarterback, you don't want to have to reach in free agency and overpay. And you don't want to have to reach in the draft and you get stuck with a guy you probably didn't want. The Minnesota Vikings should know that firsthand. So this is how it went down. The Minnesota Vikings traded one pick up from 11 to 10 with the New York Jets and drafted quarterback of the future, jjmccarthy. Now, this is how I feel about jjmccarthy. Everybody knows out there that I was a big Jaden Daniels fan. But after sitting on this for a little while and looking at how young jjmccarthy is coming to this team, he's only 21 years old. I mean, he seems to be a winner on every, level with his high school, college, and hopefully he can help bring the Minnesota Vikings their first Super Bowl. So I'm cool with it. And I just feel like this, Kevin O'Connell, is on you. You're supposed to be this quarterback whisperer. Now let's see what you and your coaching staff can really do in developing this young quarterback. I mean, I think the ceiling is high for him. I mean, I really feel like he's coming to this team with a whole lot of confidence. And, you know, coming to the Minnesota Vikings, you have like the weapons. I mean, TJ Hawkinson might not be available, you know, this season or, mid-season, considering, he's coming off that MCL injury. But you have talent at skill positions like Aaron Jones at running back, Ty Chandler. You got Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in the game. You got Jordan Addison emerging as a go-to receiver in this league. And just like I said, TJ Hawkinson. So, I mean, and not to mention two bookend tackles, left and right, with Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. So I feel like he's coming to a good infrastructure with this team, and I'm really hoping he can excel. Now, the surprise to me for the Minnesota Vikings was that with the 23 pick, I thought they were going to stick and pick, but they traded up and they got the 17 pick and they selected Dallas Turner. And I was like, damn, because I didn't think Dallas Turner was going to fall. I mean, the consensus draft boards were all like Dallas Turner was going to go maybe in the top 10, or he was going to be the first, defensive player off the board. But I was leading up to the draft. I was doing my research, and I was like seeing that a lot of people were saying that it was going to be a run on offensive players, in the first round of the draft. And that's exactly what happened. But that worked out to our advantage because, hey, we got Dallas Turner. And I really feel like if you think about it, the Minnesota Vikings are replacing Kirk Cousins with jjMccarthy, and they're replacing Danielle Hunter with Dallas Turner. And the thing about those two players, they're relatively both young. I mean, you still have to take account of with the COVID years, because you got players coming to the NFL, with being 23, 24 years old, but these guys are still relatively young, and I'm excited about it. Well, day 2, the Minnesota Vikings had no picks. I mean, I was hoping they would trade up in maybe the 3rd round, but they really had no ammunition to do so. So they just basically took the 2nd day off, and they came back, with drafting with the 108 pick in the 4th round. And this one is kind of like, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in this, in the show. But they drafted Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon, another cornerback. And then they came back, in the 6th round. They drafted Walter Ross, tackle. I think he's going to be like a swing tackle on this team. I mean, we lost Oli Udoh to free agency, and I feel like having some depth at the offensive line positions is really important. So you can sit there and get mad and be like, oh, we shouldn't have got a guard. But hey, tackles are really important on this team. Then with 203 in the 6th round, the Minnesota Vikings drafted a kicker. I like it. I mean, if you're a Minnesota Viking fan, you already know that the kicking game has always been our Achilles heel. Like Gary Anderson in 98, Blair Walsh. I mean, Daniel Carson before he went to the Raiders. I mean, the Greg Joseph. So I feel like this. If they can solidify that kicker position for the next 10 years with this guy, so be it. Like, so be it. I'm cool with it. I'm not finna be all upset and up in arms that we shouldn't have did, we shouldn't have did that. I mean, it's the 6th round. I mean, guys you're drafting at skill positions or other positions are basically our depth pieces. But if you can get a solidified starter, basically your kicker is a starter. Like, let's just get that out there. I like it. And then, they came back with pick 230, Michael Jurgens, offensive line. I mean, I'm not sure if he is able to play tackle and guard. He seems to be a guard. He can play both sides of the, both guard positions, which is cool with me. And then D-line, a kind of guy that nobody had on nobody's radar. I think this guy didn't really even have like a draft profile. It was Levi Drake Rodriguez out of Texas A&M Commerce. I never heard of that school, but I support our scouts, and I hope this guy is a baller. So that was just the initial draft picks, that was selected in the draft. I mean, like I told you guys before, I was really excited about this draft, And I really feel like the Minnesota Vikings drafted pieces that can be pillars for this team moving on. I mean, just getting the quarterback alone, and if JJ can pan out to be a franchise quarterback and lead to the promised land, I really don't care about nothing else because that's all we want. So let's keep the show moving on real quick. Let's talk about Kwesi Adolfo Menza. Now, like I said before the draft kicked off, and then right in the first couple selections, you had people talking crazy out the side of their neck, fired Kwesi. They didn't know what he was doing, but this man was aggressive. This man had a plan. He stuck to it. He drew a line in the sand. He basically said, I'm not going to overpay just to move up. And he got solid pieces along the line in this draft. He drafted jjmccarthy with the 10th overall pick, then traded back up and got a great edge rusher in Dallasturner. That's being fucking aggressive. I love that about Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. We really have to stop comparing Kwesi to Rick Spielman or what other GMs have done in the past. This is Kwesi's only third draft. The first draft, yeah, he might have made his mistakes, but then he learned from it. Okay, he learned from it. Now going forward, he was really aggressive, and like I'll give Kwesi a straight up A for how he handled this draft, and I really like what he did. So let's talk about the draft grades real quick. Draft grades. I mean, I don't really think it's fair to like give draft grades right now because it's all based on like your prediction of, hey, you drafted this guy and you got this type of value, or you got this guy at this time. Like, I just really feel like draft grades are kind of unfair. So let's just wait and see how these guys pan out. Let's hope these guys are going to the right teams with great infrastructure and they can go out and be pillars on this team going forward. Let's not worry about the quote unquote consistent draft grades, because at the end of the day, there's always going to be somebody who's not drafted or who was drafted real late that pans out and be a great Hall of Fame player. I mean, Tom Brady was drafted, he wasn't drafted at the top of the draft. Like, who cares? So I don't really give draft grades, and I think people should stop trying to give grades on everything because it kind of devalues the situation. Then you got people out there that's like, oh yeah, the consistent draft grade, they gave him an A for that. Then that guy don't even pan out. So let's move on. But UDFAs. So our UDFA last year that made the great splash was Ivan Pace. So I think Vikings might have had to do it again. You guys already know I'm not big on Ivan Pace Jr., but they got a guy. They got a guy that was projected to go maybe like the 5th round, and coming out of UCLA, edge rusher Gabriel Murphy. I mean, it's two Murphys. One, they're twins. So I know we got the better one. So he was projected to go in the 5th round, and he's like one of the first UDFAs the Vikings signed. And people are saying that basically he was the best UDFA, available, and the Vikings swooped in and got him. I mean, I was hoping for Leonard Taylor, but I'm happy what the Minnesota Vikings did because I can see some of these guys that are UDFAs come in here and actually make a difference. And I feel like even though the Minnesota Vikings didn't really go O-line in the draft, I think they kind of knew that they were going to be able to sign UDFAs and bring them in to camp and see what they can do. I mean, they signed at least like 4 offensive linemen as UDFAs. But, one of the guys that I really like coming out of Oregon, Taki Tamiami, I think he might make some noise, on the defensive line. I think he might be that guy. But since we're talking about favorites, let's talk about it. Let's just bring it up right now. My favorite draft picks and UDFAs. All right. So Dallasturner. Dallasturner is my favorite draft pick as of right now because I feel like Dallasturner is going to set the edge. He's young. You got Brian Flores is going to teach him, some more technique, and hopefully he can blossom. And I love the defense. So he's, going to be taking over the Danielle Hunter role. And the Minnesota Vikings already have multiple edge rushers, so he doesn't have to come in here and be that guy. The Minnesota Vikings can bring him along a little slow, and like I think the sky's the limit for him. But just like I said before, and I was going into it, Taki Tamiyami, whatever. I'm sorry, I might be butchering his name a little bit, but that's my favorite UDFA because he's a bigger guy. I feel we needed some beef, on the defensive line, and like I can't wait. I can't wait. I really can't wait. But let's talk about this real quick. I did a little short not too long ago, about the odd man out at quarterback. Now, since the Minnesota Vikings drafted JJ McCarthy, there are currently 4 quarterbacks on this roster. You got JJ McCarthy, Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins, and then you got Jaren Hall. So I'm sitting here thinking, like, who's going to be the odd man out? Now, I feel JJ McCarthy's not going nowhere, and Sam Darnold isn't going anywhere either. I mean, some people can go out there and say that, Nick Mullins knew the offense. He played in this system all year, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like Jaren Hall was drafted to be a, career backup. And you already have a veteran guy that basically started more games than Nick Mullins and Sam Darnold. So I think Nick Mullins may be the odd man out. I think the Minnesota Vikings will start training camp with 4 quarterbacks on the roster. But I think like mid training camp or at the end of training camp, depending on injuries or if a team needs a veteran backup, the Minnesota Vikings might package Nick Mullins, and, get a draft pick or so, whatever. But it is what it is. That's how I feel. It's the odd man out at quarterback. So going to the season, I think the depth chart would be starting quarterback would be Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy, and Jaren Hall. Now, when I'm talking about starting quarterback, I'm not going to be on this channel talking about, JJ McCarthy to start day one. I don't think the Minnesota Vikings should rush him. I think they should take your time and develop him the right way because the last thing we want is for him to come out there and destroy his confidence when starting a little bit too early. But coming to the Minnesota Vikings, JJ McCarthy actually has the luxury of not starting. That's different from these other guys like Drake May going to New England or Jaden Daniels going to Washington or even Caleb Williams going to Chicago. JJ McCarthy, has a safety net with the Minnesota Vikings. We can throw out Sam Darnold for as long as we need to so JJ McCarthy can develop because the number one priority as of right now is developing JJ McCarthy. So moving right along, Justin Jefferson's extension. Now, I talked about this, on my other social media pages. I basically feel like Justin Jefferson extensions should be coming soon. And what I mean by that is like we've already seen AJ Brown, we've already seen Devonta Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown sign their respective contract extensions. I mean, some people are throwing out there like, oh, what about CD Lamb and what about, Jamar Chase? I think Jay-Z already knows that he's going to set the market as the highest paid non-quarterback. And I kind of feel like with the draft being done, I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to pull all their resources to try to make sure that JJ, that's getting confusing, that Jefferson is going to be signed before training camp. Now, that might not happen, but I really feel like they're going to really try to make sure and get this done because we already know beginning of last season, they kind of had a deal in place, but for some reason it didn't done. I mean, I kind of know why, but it's something that, it's kind of above my pay grade. I'm not going to talk about it, but I really expect the Minnesota Vikings and Justin Jefferson, because we got 2 JJs now, that Justin Jefferson will be signed before training camp. I really hope it gets done. But this is something I'm probably going to talk about more in depth, in later videos. But I see a lot of training camp battles brewing. I mean, with the Minnesota Vikings drafting Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon, I mean, he's like 6'3", he's long, he's length, he got length. I mean, I see the Minnesota Vikings are going to have a lot of training camp battles. And I think the training camp battles will be on an offensive line, for the left guard spot, Blake Brando and a couple of guys that they brought in. And then you got the backup positions, the swing tackle position, you got the swing guard position. You're gonna have a battle at center. So I think the offensive line depth is going to battle within itself. The cornerback battle is going to be real interesting to see. Just like I said with Kyrie Jackson, you got guys like Andrew Booth Jr., Caleb Evans, um, Shaquille Griffin. I mean, Makai Blackman. I think I feel like guys like Makai Blackman and Byron Murphy, I think their jobs are going to be solidified. I think it's going to be like more so that like the backup roles. And I'm really interested to see if Andrew Poole Jr. can excel and kind of jump the depth chart, because I look at it like this now, like he's going into his third training camp. I mean, he's going to be in Brian Flores' system for over a year. And if guys like Kyrie Jackson can come in here and jump him in the depth chart, it might be time to move on. Not feel the same way about Lewis Seen. So, I mean, we getting there right now. They're in their third season. So let's hope that they can, try to excel and, develop and move a little bit forward. And maybe it was just a learning curve and injuries that kind of hindered them from being successful in the past couple of years. But I think there is a kicking battle too. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings signed Romo from the XFL earlier in free agency, and then they had just drafted the kicker. I mean, the kicking battle is kind of beneficial. I mean, I think the kicker they drafted from Alabama is going to win eventually, but training camp is going to be real interesting. So, with that being said, man, I really thank everybody for subscribing to the channel. I thank everybody for, following me on all the social media pages. I really appreciate it. I mean, all the new subscribers I got, doing the draft party, everything like that. Shout out to everybody that giving me the other platforms to be on. I really appreciate it. But you know how I end this? Skol, baby.